Okay, so this tutorial is based on this post here in the Crockoblock Facebook community. The author was wanting to know how to do a feature that's in this video. A bit hard to see in this, so I'm going to head over to the actual page, which is this page here. So this is the Crockoblock feature list page. And what he's particularly looking at is if we look at this section over here, if you can see my mouse, on the left-hand side of my mouse, you can see 3 dots as a button. If I move my mouse over that column, 3 dots disappear and an extra button comes underneath of it, the integrations button. If I move it out of there, the integration button disappears and the 3 dots come back. So it turns out that that's actually what he was looking for. So that inspired me to create a tutorial showing you a way to do this. So if we head over to my tutorial, here it is here. There's only 3 simple steps to this. I will just go through the tutorial and then I will come back to it and explain a bit about how the CSS actually works. The first thing is we've got to get our CSS rules. So what it says here is copy and paste the CSS below to your preferred location. This is going to depend on how you work. Have a look below. I've got some notes on that. If you use Elementor free, you won't have the site settings custom CSS. So you need to paste it into customize. So this is the WordPress customize additional CSS, or if you've got a theme that you use for additional CSS, you can plug it into there, whatever you like. I use Elementor PRO, so I'm going to paste it, in my case, into site settings custom CSS. Now, all of my code I've set up in these code highlighters, and all you need to do is click on it to copy to the clipboard. So I'm going to left click on this. I'm going to head over to a page, which I've got ready. I'm going to stick a listing grid on here, by the way. And from here, you can go to any editor. I'm just going to go into my site settings and custom CSS. I'm going to paste my CSS into there and update it. Okay, so now I've got my site setting CSS. I head back over to my tutorial. So step 2 is to create our jet engine listing item. And we're going to create that with whatever widgets you want. And then we're going to set some classes. So I'm just going to start the widget first. If I head back over to my listing items, I've already started one here. I've got a blank at the moment. So I've called it demo post. I'm going to edit that with Elementor. I'm going to add a single section to the page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my outline styling on the column, and I'll show you why. In here, when I mouse over that, see the column expands, but the others don't. If I put this outline on the section, then all of the sections will expand at the same rate. So I've got another video which explains how to get equal height columns with listing grids, and it explains the difference between your columns and your sections for how this works. So you can look at that if you're not sure. So first thing I'm going to do is go to my column, and I'm just going to put some styling on this. So I'm just going to maybe go into the advanced, actually not the advanced, the style, the border, and I'm going to put a box shadow on it. Just drop that back a little bit because I think it's a little bit too heavy the way they do it there, and maybe stick a border radius of 8 on that. And I'm going to put a dynamic field, the header. I'm going to call that my title, and we'll make that say an H3. Pretty straightforward so far. All right, let's put a couple of buttons in this. I'm going to get a button. I'm going to put a button in here. I want to try and work on a similar sort of a layout to, where are we? To this. So I've got a few buttons. I'm actually going to put this content below it, but I've got a few buttons there. So I'm going to put 2 buttons that are always visible. So regardless of whether I'm hovered or not, a button which is the dots that disappears on hover, and a button which is the integrations which appears on hover. I'm going to simulate this. If I go into my button there and I set my padding to say 4 pixels, make it nice and small, make it a bit bigger, maybe 8 pixels. And we're going to set our width to inline auto and put a little bit of a margin on the right. The margin right, maybe, I don't know, 8 pixels. And let's actually name this. We'll call this, I'll just put that visible. And we'll duplicate that button. We've got two buttons that are always visible. I'm going to duplicate again. And I'll call this one here visible on hover. Okay, and we're going to just duplicate this button here again. I'm going to do the 3 dots on that. So let's make that 3 dots. Okay, we might need to make these a little bit wider so that pops over, but let's have a look at that soon. Okay, so on the 3 dots, I'm going to go back to my tutorial. Okay, so what we have here is we want to put the WPG visible hover, and I'll explain why I've got the WPG a little bit later, to the container that you want the hover effect to be on. So what I mean by that is if you want this hover effect to be on the whole container, so in this case, if we went to here, it's regardless of where they are in this container, you want it to hover, then you put it on the section. If you only want it to be on the column, then you put it on the column. I'm going to put it on the column in this case. I go to my column. I'm going to add my CSS class. Oops, that didn't copy. Go back to my tutorial, copy that, and stick that as the class there. So WPG visible on hover. So this column is the container. When I hover on that, I want these to either hide or show. So go back to our tutorial. Now for the ones that we want to be visible on hover, we add this WPG visible on mouse over. Copy that. So I want this button only to be visible when we're hovered. I'm going to add the CSS class to there. And on the other one, the 3 dots, I only want that to be visible when it's not hovered. So let's grab this class and stick it on that button. Okay, there we go, straight away. So if I move over, see how one disappears and the other one comes in. Okay, we can do some more with the CSS, maybe set the width to 0 as well so it doesn't take up space. Anyway, so that's working already. Now what we want to do is go to a listing grid layout. So I'm going to go to another page. I'm going to add section. I'm going to get us this listing grid. Stick that in there. And I'm going to tell it to use my demo post listing, which we were just working on. And there it is there. Okay. Sorry, because these buttons aren't wide enough, this isn't appearing below it. But let's actually just add columns. So make that 4 columns. And now it's more like the other one. Seeing this button here now has no spacing between the top and the top buttons. So let's go back to listing grid layout. And on each of these buttons, we're going to add a margin bottom of, oops, I just messed that up. So I think we had 8 pixels. The margin bottom of, say, 8 pixels. Same as on this one. Margin bottom of 8 pixels. Oops, 88. Because we've got our CSS, we now have to use the navigator to find that extra button. I'm going to stick 8 on there. And on the button bottom, we're not going to bother because we don't want to put margin at the bottom of that. Update that. Update. And refresh the page. And F5. Okay, now we've got some spacing on there. So what we're doing here is as we roll the mouse over, the 3 dots button fades out and the visible on hover comes in. So that's pretty much what we've done. So we've actually achieved what we want. Look at this on a real page. There it is there. Okay, let's head back over to our listing grid item. Let's say we want to put the excerpt in there. So you can put the post excerpt in there and make sure it's at the bottom. And let's say we only want that to be visible on hover as well. So let's grab that class again. So our visible on mouse over is what we want. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to stick that on the excerpt. Now when I hover, my excerpt's visible on hover as well. So really, really easy to do. And you can make whatever content visible or hidden on mouse over. Have a look at the actual page. So F5. There we go. That's doing exactly what we wanted to do. All right, now, so that's the tutorial with simple copy and paste. Now I'm just going to quickly work through the CSS. If we go back to editing this page, look at our site settings and the CSS. Actually zoom in a bit more, see if I can get in a bit bigger there so you can see a bit better. Here we go. Not too good on the side, but that's fine. So typically what I do when I set up CSS is in the top level rule, I create variables. So variables have a two dashes and then a typical syntax after that. Could be underscores or dashes, whatever you want. What I'm doing is setting a variable for show duration of 1 second, hide duration of 0.3 seconds, and a max height of 400 pixels. I'm going to talk about why we use max height. Now, what we're doing here, if I look at these first ones here, where it actually shows the on mouse over, it shows. So when the mouse is not over, we're setting the max height to 0, the opacity to 0, and we're transitioning. So this is the time it takes for the transition to be the hide duration. Okay, so this is when we're not mouse over. On the one where we're hovering, we want the max height to be the max height we've set up here. And we want the duration to be the show duration. So when we hover over it, take 1 second to go from 0 to max height and opacity of 0 to opacity to 100. When it's not moused over, we want to take 0.3 seconds for it to go back to where it was. So it's quick, it's slow to come up, then it's quick to go back. All right, so that's how that works. The other two here, they're just pretty much the opposite of that because we want this one to show when there's no mouse hover and hide when there is a mouse hover. So we're basically doing the opposite here of what we did up there. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things on how you can control this on an individual basis. So this is your site settings CSS, but we might want to override this for a particular listing item. I'll show you how you can do that and why we set these defaults up here. Now, one other point here is we're using max height rather than height. The reason for that, and I'm not really certain why in the CSS standards this is, but if you use height, height does not transition between the one setting and another. It just jumps from one setting to the other. So there's no transition. Whereas when you use max height, it transitions from one to the other. I don't understand why or know why. There may be someone else might be able to explain that. But I know max height works. So max height of 0 means it's not visible because it's 0 pixels high to a max height of 400. So it's not actually going to go to 400. It's going to go to the maximum height that it needs for that element to display, but the maximum will go to is 400. So if you've got content that you want to show that's bigger than 400, you might set that be bigger than 400. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to now head back over to my listing grid here. Not listing grid, so the listing item. And let's say on this particular listing item, we want it to be a lot slower than this. We want it to really be a slow transition in. So the way we do that is because we put our visible on hover, or sorry, WPG visible hover class on here, we can override these variables here using the attributes. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grab the first one here. Back over on the listing item, I'm going to go down into the attributes, style. So style, and sorry, and we're going to type style, then a pipe symbol. Don't do what I do. I always mess this up and put a colon there instead of a pipe, and it doesn't work. So you've got to put the pipe there. And then the variable we just copied, and I'm going to make that 4 seconds. Okay. Now you're not going to see this in the editor because it doesn't process these in the editor. So what I'm telling you now is I want the show duration to be 4 seconds. So that's really slow. All right. Style attributes override CSS attributes. So if you have a CSS rule set that says show duration is 1 second, and then on that element you have a style which sets the show duration to something else, style overrides the CSS rule. That's how we can use that as a default. So let's just update here. Get over to, where's our page? We need to go into here. Just going to zoom out of that and view this page. Now I've got a 4 second hover. It took 4 seconds. I've slowed that down. Now see, I've got a problem here. Now that as that comes in, the text is actually appearing before the rest of the widget appears. So we need to set some overflow hidden on that. Okay, so let's go back to, maybe we need to set it on this element here. We do, because we're setting the max height. So, okay, I'm with it now. So we need to go to the post excerpt, and we need to go into the advanced, custom CSS, selector, overflow, hidden. Okay, so what's happening is it's animating the height of that post excerpt, but it's not hiding the content of it. So refresh this. There we go. Now it works. Okay, so that's a 4 second and a 0.3 second when it goes back. So let's have a look at changing that. So let's go to column again, attributes. The other attribute was the hide duration. I'm just going to copy that rule there and make this the hide duration. We'll make that 1 second. So when we hover, it's going to expand over 4 seconds. When we take our mouse away, it's going to take 1 second to return back to normal. Try that. Hover 4 seconds. Oh, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Have a look. Hide duration. Okay, back to our column. Attributes. I've got a point there. I put a dot there. So hide duration. There should be a colon. and then 1 second. So this is the standard CSS. Oops. Attributes here. Back to my page. F5. 4 seconds, 1 second. 4 seconds, 1 second. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some insight as to what you can do to play with this. Pretty easy CSS rules. There's no JavaScript involved. So go for your life and see what you can do. Okay, so just a quick update. What I discovered after making this video was that I realized that pretty much all of the elements you want to show or hide by changing their max height, you needed their overflow set to hidden. So I updated the CSS, which has been updated in the tutorial. So you don't need to worry about hiding that now. Just copy and paste the CSS as it is, and it will work for you.